Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Something to Talk About Live. My name is Liz Owen. I'm the Director of Communications at PFLAG National. My pronouns are she, her, and it's so great to have you here for another edition of Something to Talk About. I'm now going to bring in, as always, my good friend and colleague, our Director of Learning and Inclusion here at PFLAG National, Jean Marie Nevada. Welcome, Jean Marie.
Liz Owen, I am waving to you again from the desert where it's freezing.
Waving to you from lovely downtown Burbank, where it is also freezing by LA standards, we should say, because we're wimps.
I know the Midwest is laughing at us right now. We will see you later, Liz, right?
You will. Oh, well, it's really all about me today. Clearly, I'm having an ego issue. Let's try that again, now with better technology.
Thank you, Liz. And hey, everybody, welcome to Something to Talk About Live. My name is Jean Marie Nevada, and I'm the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National. Every single week, we get together to talk about something and invite a couple of friends to join us, and everybody's participating online, so it's a really fun conversation. If you want to get our article for this week and the questions that we're going to use, you can go to straightforequality.org/discussion series and click on this week's article. We also have an archive of all of our past ones, and you can watch those episodes on YouTube if you want. So this week we are talking about the intersection of LGBTQ history and disability. 2020 was the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And one of the facts that a lot of people don't know is that about a third of people who are LGBTQ are also people who say that they have a disability. So there is a really big intersection. And we had a great article this week from out in New Jersey by Victoria A Brownworth called The Intersection of LGBTQ and History and Disability. And so to have the conversation today, I'm going to once again introduce one of my colleagues from New Jersey, because New Jersey has brought you Bruce Springsteen, Bon Jovi, Frank Sinatra, and Dara Baldwin. So seeing if we can get Dara to join me now.
Hi, everyone. Peace and blessings. Oh, I love that. And Sarah Vaughan and Whitney Houston.
Oh, and Whitney, yes. We always have to.
From North New Jersey, where I'm from. Yeah.
You know what? Maybe we just need to do a whole show on why New Jersey is great.
Earl Street, right? Oh, Glen Close. Yeah.
Oh, and the Statue of Liberty, as we've established.
That's right. It's ours. That's right. Jersey in the house.
So, Dara, you are the Director of National Policy for the Center for Disability Rights. Can you tell us a little bit about Center for Disability Rights and the work that you do there?
Sure. So, peace and blessings. Thank you for having me. Everyone out there, be safe during this whole pandemic and all the other things we're going through. The Center for Disability Rights is a CIL, which is a non-residential center where people with disabilities go for services. It was created through the Rehab Act in the 70s. You will see CILs, there's one in every state, probably many more. Like in my CIL is located in Rochester, New York. We have about seven different offices. But I live and work in Washington, D.C., D.C. statehood. I have to say that. And one of our 5 pillars is advocacy, because you have to continue, you have these rights, the ADA, Americans with Disabilities, 30 years, but you have to continue to fight to keep it strong and to make sure it's not taken away. And so that's part of my job, but I do federal policy here in Washington, D.C.
Excellent. So I want to talk a little bit about the article, but I also want to talk about policy with you related to disability, because I think there are a tremendous number of intersections that we can get into. So this article actually named a number of LGBTQ people who also are people who either have or had disabilities. Barbara Jordan, Marsha P. Johnson, Anderson Cooper, even Morty Vanford, the son of our founder. So Dara, why do you think this part of the conversation tends to be less visible? I mean, we definitely talk about identity when it comes to sexual orientation and gender identity, but the disability piece often gets left out. What's going on there?
Great questions, and you are correct. And Barbara Jordan is one of my heroes. The article was excellent, and I think covered, just what's being talked about. Barbara Jordan also is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, which I'm a member of. And as it said in the article, she hid that, right? She hid her disability. She hid her fact that she was a lesbian woman because of the times that were going on. But I will say this, over the years, a lot of that has gone away. as far as people hiding it, but not really in everyone's community, right? I think that's more in white people's communities, in BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color communities. It's not the same. I don't think that is where we are in those communities. And I say, I'm not LGBTQ, but I'm part of the family, as everyone tells me, because I've been doing the work for so long. So, but that's why you have the National Black Justice Coalition, which is run by, David Johns, and a Black community wanted to come and have that kind of advocacy and that kind of conversation. But also, that's the LGBTQ plus, and I'm learning twin spirit side of this work. On the disability side, it goes both ways, right? So the disability rights community is centered on white folks, and has been since, the start of the ADA. When you read about the ADA fight to get the ADA, you only read about stories about white people. And they erase Black people while we created disability justice, which is different from, right? It's just like environmental justice and reproductive justice are Black folks doing those work around climate change for environmental, and around abortion rights and all kinds of things for reproductive justice. But anyway, disability justice. So it's not only that it was just white folks doing disability rights, but they were white straight folks, most of them, at least. Right? They weren't open. Again, like they might have been a Barbara Jordan and not telling people, but that community really only looks at the disability. And it's not until you come into, right, especially Black folks, you cannot tell someone who is fighting this fight, which is what disability rights people do, is tell them, well, you can only think about your disability. Right. And no other way in which you identify, right? And that's why I came up with multi-marginalization, is that, I told disability rights folks, you can't do that to a Black woman, because that's what I saw it being done to, and Black queer young people. You can't tell them to pick which marginalization is more important. Yeah. And so in the disability rights community, which is also a very insular community, a lot of people do not know about disability rights and don't know about this. They don't know about this conversation that they have in a horrible history they have around race, around being homophobic, around being elitist. It's also very much upper middle class white folks doing this work, and around, just not addressing those issues. And so I think that's where that comes from. But things have changed, because like I said, these young folks came along and said, no, we don't like this. And they created disability justice, which has 10 principles. The first one being intersectionality, which is where you hit, right? And the two young people who started this, Mia Mingus, is right, a queer woman of Asian descent, right? Of color. Yeah. Those multi-marginalizations.
I love that you said that, because I hear, we all hear the word intersectionality used so much right now. And it always frustrates me, because I always want to scream, you need to read the Kimberly Crenshaw and understand that this wasn't necessarily what you think it is. And that it was very much about exactly what you just said. You cannot look at somebody and say, we are only going to let you represent as a person with disabilities. It also needs to be as a person of color, as a person who's queer, as a person who's working class. And that we need to also look at people that way too, to get the whole story. So I love the fact that you're saying that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about policy and legislation that's going on right now, because I have you here and I can get into this conversation, and this excites me. So right now we are starting a whole new congressional session, a whole new world right now. So are there any places that people should be paying attention to where we might see these two conversations start to intersect in terms of policy? And if not, is there anything on the disability front that we should be paying attention to in terms of supporting as allies?
Oh, definitely. Great question. And you are right about the intersectionality. I always use the example. There is an African-American trans woman who is a refugee, formerly incarcerated, right, with a disability. They exist, right? They're out there, right? All of those marginalizations. So with that, I would say number one is, I think on everybody's list is COVID relief, right? Is let's get through this pandemic, and all aspects of it. The giving out of the vaccine. And right, I'm on the vaccine equity. There's an equity caucus to talk about this. LGBT, it was very interesting. They wrote up the principles, the LGBTQ wasn't in. I was like, hello, wait a minute. I said, hold on, something's missing here. I started this work 12 years ago. At that time, I had to push for disability to be in there. It was very nice that I had to push disability, but LGBTQ, people weren't talking about it, and they weren't talking about people with HIV and AIDS, right? Yeah. And how this affects them. So the distribution of the vaccine and how that will be done is very important. People need to talk to their congresspeople. They need to talk to politics is local. So talk to your mayors and all of that and say, you have to do this in equity. Equity is fair and impartial. The distribution of relief and economic funds, right? Disabled folks, every issue you think of, you have people with disabilities and you have people who are LGBTQ plus and twin spirit, right? So if you're giving out PPP protection, paid protection plans, you need to be looking at small businesses, which in this country, the way in which women, people of color, most marginalized groups get out of poverty is by owning their own businesses. Let's all do it. Small businesses, right? Because it's formerly incarcerated folks. It's small businesses. So the economic plan that needs to include all of us, right? What I was just saying there, and then finally, the relief of how this is going to go forward, right? Mask mandate. Right, we're going to have this mask mandate now on public transportation and on, you already have it on airplanes. Now you're going to have it on surface transit. What does that look like, right? Many people know Black Lives Matter isn't just about law enforcement walking down us, people walking or rolling down the street. It's, how does that look if someone won't put their mask on the bus, but now that's a mandate? Do you call the police and do you get this person killed? Right? LGBT, right? Trans Black women are killed at a higher rate in this country, right? From all kinds of things, right? So what does that look like? And how are we making sure that all of the things around COVID are being done correctly? Yes. In an equitable way. Like, we want to make sure people are safe. Again, back to the vaccine distribution, how are you going to distribute it to trans women of color, trans women who are indigenous? What does that look like? And are you engaging with the community who assist with that? So those are real big. That's real top on our list. And then we do have a couple of, as you say, it's a new Congress, so bills are just being put out. One I'll say that many people have worked on is the Stop Bullying. Mm-hmm. And it's a state task force opportunity program, and Representative, I always mess up his name, but Raja Krishmana from this Democrat from Illinois, it's his bill. It doesn't have a number yet, but people think because we're in COVID and students are online and that's not true, because there's some states where students are going to school, like Florida. Bullying still is going on. It's going on in a different way online, which online bullying has been going on for years. And so we want this bill is a grant through the Department of Education for schools to have a commission or a committee to look at bullying, to study it, but not just study it with giving us some intentional action plans to stop bullying in schools and to stop bullying, and specifically around children with multi-marginalizations, right? LGBTQI plus, twin spirit, disabilities.
It's funny, as you mentioned these pieces of legislation and looking at these different efforts, I'm sitting here and I'm like, these are the exact same things that we're talking about at PFLAG, because there are so many shared issues. And I also think there's a lot of shared experiences that bring a lot of knowledge into how we should be navigating these conversations, because we've all been doing this work a little bit differently. So, you talked about, making sure that we are doing culturally humble, culturally appropriate approaches to this kind of work. I think one of the things that often people, when we're having these conversations, ask is, what should I be doing? So what should I be doing as an individual? And we're PFLAG. We love helping people change those little everyday changes that have really big impact. So when we start talking about people with disabilities, and certainly people with disabilities in the queer space, Dara, how do you think the everyday person, first of all, can advocate? And also, are there any things that you would suggest for people to sort of elevate stories or create space for people?
So the first thing, thank you, great question again. The first thing I tell people who ask me this question is, and I say this too, and I say my advocates because they're mine. Those are my people. We take it from the streets to the suites, right? And I say to my advocates, look in the mirror every morning and say, I am valuable. I am powerful. I am somebody who's from the streets who can take it to the suites and make a difference, right? Like, let's start there. Because if you don't believe that you can do that, all the other stuff I'm about to tell you, you can't do either. So I'll just say that you have to, right? I believe in mantras, right? You saw our wonderful poet laureate at the inauguration.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And she says her mantra before she speaks. Right. So you have to do that. The other thing is be diligent and understand and know. Read your local newspaper. There's a lot of stuff in it. Some people still have newspapers, so people don't read the paper. Read newspapers. A lot of information that you won't hear on CNN in the paper. So you need to know that, so you know what you're fighting for. I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago around people not really knowing their neighbors. And if you've seen this person and you've seen this person in a wheelchair or walking, just walk up and say, have your mask on and let them know, have the social distancing and say, I'm your neighbor. I never spoke to you before. This is who I am. Let me know what I can do for you. If it's not the person, sometimes it's children. And the reason this came up was that the fact that children with disabilities are home now, and most parents are by themselves. Most people are single parents and they have no respite, right? Because usually their child goes to school or they have occupational therapy or physical therapy goes on for them. That's not happening. And so most mothers, but some fathers, parents, caregivers of these children, it's 24/7. And so, if you see, sometimes they bring them out for fresh air and just say, you know what? I will stand here and watch your child go walk around the corner. Literally tell them, go walk around the corner, because that's just a respite. It's just some fresh air. Go walk around the corner. I will be here. Your child will be okay. And they start to get to know you. Maybe those are ways you can make a difference. It's not getting a bill signed. And it's not saying, oh, the COVID release, because that's a big thing, right? Don't leave that to us. That's our job. When we call, we will do that. But those are small things that you can do. There's some really good books to read about disabilities, and I'll send a list to you, Jean, so you'll know. One I'll say here, many people tell people to read No Pity by Joe Shapiro. It's a really good book. I love Joe. He's an NPR news reporter who has a family member with a disability, his sister. He knows this. It's all white. It's from a white perspective. But the reason No Pity, right? No paternalism. People look at people with disabilities and say, woe is we, and they can't do. And that is not true. If you take nothing else away from what I'm saying to you, is that there's nothing wrong with having a disability, just like there's nothing wrong with being LGBTQ and plus. It's the same thing. And people look at me and say, Dara, you can't possibly believe it. And I look at them and say, my grandfather, 2 generations before my mother's father, was told he was stupid and could not go to college. And right, he was a Black man in Alabama. He left Alabama because he had to take care of his family. He put his 6 brothers and sisters through college, his children through college, right? So we were told Black people were stupid and couldn't do anything. And actually, Black people, when we come into most spaces, we over excel and outdo many people. We had a Black man who's president of the United States, and we now have a Black woman of color, she's South Asian and Black, who is the vice president of the United States. So when people tell us, right, they told Black people this, don't tell me that people with disabilities are stupid or can't do anything. And so don't play into that, right? Be as respectful as you are to other people you speak to, as do that to people with disabilities, and have a friendship. The only way you get right, the only way I know so much and love my LGBTQ community is because I'm there. Like I just said, I'm family. I come to all the events. I go to conferences. I sit and say, okay, and I ask, well, what is that? I don't really understand it. I'm asking in a kind and actually way I want to know. Do the same thing with disabled people. I've been around disabled people all my life, even before this job, so it wasn't that hard for me.
And I have to say, you are everywhere. I mean, every place that I look in the queer space is Dara. Like, you are constantly there. So, I mean, you are so family. You are really, really there, Dara, and we love you. I have a question, which I actually sort of didn't think I wanted to think to ask, but I'm going to throw it at you because I'm kind of curious about your feelings about this. You know, one of the things that we find that we're talking about more and more when we talk about inclusion for people with disabilities is the inclusion of people who have disabilities that are not necessarily very visible. That there are some that immediately you can meet somebody and you can figure out that something is there. But in a lot of cases, and as somebody with depression, I know this, it is not as visible. Can you talk a little bit about how that conversation is changing? Is it getting better? Do you think there is more awareness coming around this? Or do you think we still have a lot of work to do on this? Because I think this is a point that a lot of people don't understand. And I think we might be missing a lot of opportunities too.
You are correct. I think things are changing. We're not where we need to be. And I think the only reason things are changing, and really around depression, is because of the COVID. It's because of what we're in, the isolation, the fact that you're not in contact with your family. Your broader family. You may be with your nuclear family, right? Your partner, your children, but not your parents, your aunties, your godmothers, your best friends and things like that. And I'm someone, even though I live in DC, Jersey's 3-hour drive, on a train, 3 hours. I used to go home once a month to see my father. My father still lives in New Jersey. And my best friends, just 3 of us, the 3 girls, had our dinner. That's very, I've never gone a year and not had dinner with my best friends. That's just, we're all sitting here so that is, that's coming along and people are seeing that. But I think what you said, I know for a fact, many people also don't understand that people don't have to disclose their disability. Right. That is the ADA. That's the law. That's part of it. So that's one. 2, you may be working with someone, right, who has multiple sclerosis is one of them, and episodic disabilities. And that means that you have a disability and it's chronic and it's there, but it's not always flaring up, just like HIV and AIDS, right? MS, multiple sclerosis, depression, those kinds of things. And something will trigger it. Even if you're a cancer survivor, right? You're never cured from cancer. You're just in remission and you can use the ADA, right? It's not until people go into those episodes that the coworkers and people find out. Right. So that's another reason, right? People won't talk about it because also they get discriminated against at work or even in their housing. We still have that. So to answer your question is no, I don't think it's gotten any better, but I think we're on the right track when you have conversations like this with multiple communities of people who understand and know. And I hear it from people all the time. Well, she's my friend. She could have just told me she had multiple sclerosis and I would have been there for her. And I say to them, first of all, that's not how things are done. You have to meet people where they are at. And that is their story and their privilege of whether or not they want to tell you. And so because people are still not understanding of the disabilities and what that means to people's lives, we're still not there yet. And like I said, people need to read about it, just like people needed to read about LGBTQ and what that means. And, your son or your child comes home and says to you, this is what I am. It's like everything. I mean, not even just LGBTQ. It's like, oh, I want to play lacrosse. My brother came home to say, I want to play lacrosse. A Black family. My father was like, what the heck is lacrosse? We had to go get a book. We read it. I was like, I don't know, Dad, hold on. And so anything your child comes home to, right? You go and you research it and you study it. Those are the things you do, right? That's what you should do about all things in life. You take it in with an open mind and say, okay, and admit you don't know, and then learn about it. And until until people learn about disabilities, I still don't see us there, but I see us moving towards the better part of the community being accepted and understood.
To be clear, I didn't even know what lacrosse was until I left New Jersey and moved to the West Coast. So yeah, we didn't play that in Jersey City. It's not something we did. So thank you for making me laugh inappropriately at that, Dara. We're never going to be allowed to do a show again together. You know that. I actually saw a question pop up in the chat that's going on. It actually came from Diego, our policy director, and I think it's a really good one, and I'd like to ask you. And Diego actually asked, are there any resources or suggestions that you have to help people navigate the safety, getting safety or the risks when they disclose an invisible disability? So any advice around that or places that people should be looking? Because it is very difficult. I mean, I can say, I don't tell everybody about depression because people act weird and start handling with you with kid gloves. So suggestions?
Yeah, sure. So every region has what's called an ADA resource center. And you can go to www.ada.gov and they'll come up. If you know, every federal agency administration has the 10 regions around the country. So, you know, like HUD has 10 regions and DHA. Okay. So the same thing with the ADA. Ours here in DC is Mid-Atlantic. The Mid-Atlantic, they're wonderful. The ADA Resource Center. They have a website that is free. All of the stuff, information on there is free. And you can go and look and it'll tell you about, you know, Title I of the ADA, which is employment. It'll tell you that. Let me say this. One is you can go there and learn about the ADA. ADA is not a hard law to learn. It's not long at all. It's 5 titles. It's not long. There's a training course in there. You can read Title I and you take the test. Read Title II and you take the test. It is free, like I said, and you can start it in January and finish it in December. And we make advocates take it because you can't fight for a law you don't know, right? Okay, so that's there. And they also have resources. They'll have they usually have training sessions. So like if you're an employer and you want to know about ADA reasonable, you can go to their training courses. Now, of course, they're online. When they weren't, I'm sure before the pandemic, they also have conferences. So they'll have a regional conference like here in DC or DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia. They switch it up every year that you can attend. Nominal fee, like $200, your office. You can people bring their whole office so they learn about the ADA. They also have a national conference that a lot of people attend that. I go every 2 years, even though I know the ADA. It's just a way to refresh yourself and get to know it. The other one, if this is for you personally and you're contemplating about your job, you can contact any of your CILs, the Centers for Independent Living, and you go to ncil.org. That's the National Council on Centers for Independent Living. They have in the tool side, it says find your CIL. You hit it and it will, you know, bring up New Jersey, and you know, you live in Bayonne. Oh, here's the CIL for Bayonne. Here, you live in Jersey City. Here's the CIL for Jersey City. At the CILs, we do have resources and people you can talk to about how to talk to your employee. You know, if you just get diagnosed and right, because MS and those kinds of things you don't find out till later in life. And they'll tell you how to navigate, telling your employer, telling your family, that kind of thing. And then finally, there's called the protection and advocacy programs, which are the civil rights lawyers for people with disabilities. Again, this is a federal program, free, and they're there to help disabled folks. They also will help, parents or partners, whoever come, as long as the person is, says that you can come with them and all that kind of stuff. And that's through the National Disability Rights Network, and that's ndrn.org. And the same thing, you'll go and it'll say, pick your state, Disability Rights Connecticut, Disability Rights Pennsylvania. They usually name that. Some of them aren't, like Illinois is not that, and I can't even think of the name of theirs, but you'll find they have the PNA there, protection and advocacy. And so the same with the CILs and the PNA. There's one in every state, every territory, and on the native land. We are part of the Native American community, is part of this as well. So you will find help, and most of them have translators, people, if you need ASL interpreter, if you need language interpreter, especially, like the CIL in Brooklyn, they've got 6 different languages there, right? Spoken. So they're great. Joe and them are like, oh, hold on, we have a French, interpreter. We have a Spanish interpreter, right? Because you're in.
I was actually going to ask about interpretation. So
interpretation, yes. Like here in DC, the CIL here, there's 3 CILs in DC. And Richard Simmons is the ED there. Same thing. He has lots of interpreters. We have the embassies here. So you have people from all over the world. So he's really good. And the embassy people help out. They'll be like, oh, hold on, we'll send someone over who speaks Russian, or we'll send somebody over who speaks Italian to help out. But there's plenty of places you can go for free information. And the last thing I'll say is at the CILs, the Centers for Independent Living, is also fellowship. A lot of our CILs are open, and they have, all of the CILs have a conference room because they need it, because they do trainings. They do parties. They do Halloween party. And they still are doing this during the pandemic. All CILs are open because we are considered essential, right? To livelihood. And that is one area that is very essential. It's as I just told you, the isolation, right? And so they've having basketball games, and because some of them have basketball courts and stuff. So if you're coming into your disability and you don't really know about it, go to the CIL and you will find your comrades. and they will help you. And I will say this, a lot of the SILs who are in, I would say mostly, cities, Philadelphia, they're very good around LGBTQ community. Some of the others are coming along. I wouldn't be like, if you feel afraid because you're LGBTQ, just so you know, right, there's love everywhere. And you will find the love in the SILs. You will definitely find that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dara. We are at our time. You and I did it. We filled up the 30 minutes. We knew we would, and we did, because Jersey. Dara, will you come back and talk to us again? Because I'm sure we should be continuing this conversation.
Yes, I will, because I'm excited about the 117th and a new administration. We'll see what we can get done. So we need to talk about that.
Thank you so much, Dara. We will see you again. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate everything that you do. Mwah. Well, we are at time again. So it is the end of our show. Again, visit us at pflag.org if you need some help or want to learn more about PFLAG. We will be back next week as we wrap up every single week. Run fast, laugh hard, and be kind. And please continue to wear your masks, everybody. We'll see you next week. See